When I was growing up, I remember the boom that was happening with third-person action games from the likes of DMC and No More Heroes. It was safe to say these games were on the rise. From the high impact these games brought to the cool and edgy characters I'm sure some of us wanted to be at one point, I was hooked on these. I remember playing a lot of No More Heroes 2 and diving into Bayonetta a few times but never beating it. There's just something about beating the shit out of everything in your path that gets my primal instincts running. Feeling like a god or that one boss character everyone picks when they're losing. You know that kid who always picked Supersonic and Sonic R and pretended he wasn't broken, or not, because I doubt anyone else besides me played Sonic R and actually liked it. Also, that kid who did it was me. I was that kid. If there's one system I can think of that is full of these types of games, it's none other than the PS2. With graphics and 3D gameplay being more in its teen years after the N64 and PS1 incredibly experimental days are long gone, devs were able to go crazier, and I mean crazier with a capital C. With animations that seem like the character you're playing as doesn't even know what gravity is. With more powerful hardware, the games could get more experimental, but usually in a more fleshed out way than the PS1 and N64 days. But even Ghost Rider and Jack Skellington have decent games while still being weird to play. In today's world, hearing two movie tie-in games being good or decent isn't something you ever hear anymore. Unless you're Peppa Pig, that game was made by a AAA developer with a lot of heart and soul into it. Then you have the whole genre of third-person shooters from the likes of Ratchet & Clank, G.O.R.E, Ghost in the Shell. I would say this dominated more of the PS2 library because there are a lot of shit games in this style. While on one hand you got Resident Evil 4, which was a game changer in the industry, you then have games that no one would ever touch, like State of Emergency 2 with Spanky and his gang, to 25 to Life. There is one series I never heard of till this very video, a series that when I saw this game in the store, I thought it was just going to be another Dirge of Cerberus clone, which is that third-person shooter Final Fantasy game that everyone hates, but boy, was I wrong. This game would be one of the shittiest games I played, but a masterpiece at the same time. I don't know what it is, but this game somehow kept me going for its 12 to 15 hour runtime, even if it has no reason to be this long. So today, join me as we talk about the fourth game in the series that no one thought would ever happen, and let's dive into Gungrave G.O.R.E. Now, before we talk about the newest addition to the series, we have to go back to the series' roots, with the first game that was on the PS2, and it was actually the first game made by Red Entertainment. They would go on to make games such as Fossil Fighters, some of the Soccer Wars games, and at one point a Trigun game till that was canned. Now that may sound weird to some of you, but when you have Yasuhiro designing characters for Gungrave, it makes a lot more sense how they were able to get the Trigun license. With Grave sporting that usual style of his. The sharp edges and thick outlines really just feel like looking at an early 90s anime pro tag. The original game has this nice cel-shaded look that seems to lean more on the darker shades being prominent, which usually is the opposite look most games go for with cel shading, but this somehow pulls it off quite well. When Gungrave was released, the game seemed loved, but was critiqued heavily on the game's length being too short, as the first game could be beaten in around 2 hours or less. Personally, seeing how the game plays and how the new game is, the length shouldn't be an issue at all, as expecting this style of gameplay to be able to stay interesting for more than 10 hours is quite dumb. I feel the first game's length is perfect and makes it come off as a more arcade-like style game, one of those you play and enjoy it and either replay it a few days later or even right after you finish. It's like Star Fox 64 in that regard. While both games are quite short, even with Star Fox Multiple Paths, these games never overstay their welcome. While I still have yet to play the first game, I can say I'm excited to see how it feels and try it out. Then from the success of the first game, a sequel was created called Gungrave Overdrive, and I can see why they called it Overdrive, as Grave went from the slow corpse walking guy to a guy that can swing a giant coffin like it's a foam bat. This man can move. But from what I've gathered, fans have talked about how they messed up everything from the first game, and they listened too much to the critics when it came to making changes to the game, like the game's length, as now the game can take upwards of 6 to 8 hours. They do this by dragging the levels out and making some enemies just be bullet sponges. I haven't touched this game either, but while I can see visually, it looks great. But on the gameplay side of things, it looks like it's trying too hard to be something more than what it is. Gungrave VR is the next game in the series, and this just feels like a generic arcade shooter, and while you can still see this in third person if you want, it defeats the whole aspect of VR. It looks nice as it looks like an updated HD version of the first game, but not much to really say on this. And now we can finally talk about the newest game, and if I had to describe it, I would say it's like Shadow the Hedgehog, but for adults, with this game being the most edgy piece of shit I've ever seen. And that is a compliment before anyone gets mad. Right from the intro, this man is being launched out of a coffin and breaking people's necks. If Shadow the Hedgehog was the guy who says fuck randomly in public, Gungrave would be the guy to outright say a racial slur. Now, this hunk of a man here is called Grave, and he's voiced by Kirk Thornton, who is also the voice of Shadow the Hedgehog in Boom and Forces. Comes full circle every time. Now, before we get into the game, I want to mention at least the first quarter of the game was played without patches this game got, so I'll go ahead and cover the stuff I experienced pre-patch, but just know there's a lot more stuff I didn't discover from the pre-patch to the present patch now. If you want a more in-depth look at the patches, I'll put the patch notes down below in the description, either that or a pinned comment, whichever one I do, probably both. Keep in mind there's a few things the patch notes don't mention, but when these points come up, I'll talk about them. Gungrave G.O.R.E is a third-person action shooter that feels like a game you know your older brother has, but you're not allowed to play. Something you would see him playing and think, oh wow, that looks so cool. The story to Gungrave G.O.R.E has you taking the role of Grave as you're setting off to stop the spread of a drug called Seed that mutates people. You find out a gang called the Raven Clan is spreading their drugs everywhere with refineries, one of the main places being Scumland, which is just a place for poor people. Oh my god, that's really fucked. There's 4 bosses who run the clan, and you're tasked to take these guys out before their drugs take everyone else out. So we head off to Scumland, and this is when the game starts. This cutscene plays, I talked about before with Grave just murdering gang members. I really do love these cutscenes, and they look quite nice coming from a small dev team such as them. But man, the voice acting for a lot of characters is just so bad. Everyone besides a few people sounds like it's their first VA role ever. I feel no one was really given any direction, as a lot of the times, what should be a heated or heavy moment in the story, they'll just talk like it's another Tuesday.
Of my latest hardware, but it's just you. What a disappointment. Let's finish this clown off quick so we can get back to business at hand.
Will you finish me this time around?
Will you, Grave?
You're sparing me for the second time. My debt is getting thicker. What do you want from me?
Information, baby.
I must say, I didn't expect you would survive Scumland, but here you are. Unfortunately, though, all your efforts are worth nothing. Nothing!
And the voice acting doesn't get better either with your teammates, as there's a girl named Quartz and she'll talk to you and give you one-liners, and these get really annoying fast. She will usually tell you stuff you can clearly see yourself, or she'll repeat the same dialogue over and over with the same exact voice line, and it's awful.
Grave, watch out! Mafia gangs! Nice move! Grave, the enemies are approaching! Grave, they're coming from all sides! Grave, the doors! Grave, don't fall down.
You can turn this off, thankfully, and speaking of the options you get, there's quite a few, at least with the present patch now. You get a lot of voice options, from changing the voices for your characters or people you play as, or just changing the enemy voices like the Mafia men. There's even ray tracing on the PS5 version, but it makes the game run at 30 FPS, and when I turned it on, I couldn't tell much of a difference personally. Gungrave G.O.R.E also decided to go back to its roots and add a cell shading option, and I prefer this over the normal look, but I can't help but think this was more thrown in there to hide how bad some areas look without it. You see this a lot, but a lot of devs will use cell shading as a crutch instead of an artistic choice, but when the game does shine with the cell shading, it really shines. I do think it's nice you can change the look on the fly at any point. Most games wouldn't be able to do this, so props to them for getting this to work. So one of the biggest changes I noticed when it came to pre-patch was that a lot of your shots never felt like they had impact. I would shoot and it felt like I was hitting everything with P's instead of bullets. There's also no auto shot in this, meaning you have to mash the trigger over and over. This did get addressed in later patches where you can trigger auto shot on the fly with the D-pad and the shots feel like there's more impact to them, but still not enough to where I would like it. If you do decide to use the auto shot for the game, it does come with a drawback. Grave is able to hold the trigger button to perform a charge shot that's a single blast. If you have auto shot on, you can't charge this, so it's a little annoying. For some reason in the new patches, they made the charge shot that was originally a big blast that had a real punch to it. It's now multiple shots, and half of the time, not every shot will even hit anything. Often I would go to use this attack and only 1 or 2 shots would hit, while the rest would just go right through them. If I had to choose between the two, I would much rather prefer the single charge shot, as I never had that once go through someone with no damage, and it feels way nicer to use. For the most part, Gungrave's gameplay has you going through 31 stages where you shoot your way through everything. Levels can be boiled down to long corridors with enemies coming from everywhere, and anytime the level seems like it has another path you could take, you soon learn these usually lead to invisible walls or dead ends. It doesn't help when sometimes enemies will be in a path towards an invisible wall, having you shoot through them thinking you're going the right way just to learn you're going to a dead end. Some of the stages also feel very similar and makes me wonder why couldn't they have just merged a few of these stages together. You would have less stages, but the stages you would have wouldn't feel so bloated, as a lot of them come down to go through a door, shoot people, go through another door, and now you're in an area that looks the same and you're shooting people. I really can't tell you much about the stages besides the Vietnam one and the casino stage, only because one, it's a Vietnam stage and I don't see that very often, and the casino stage just has a lot of neon lights, so it's the most prettiest stage out of every single stage in the game. And then these stages run the issue of how long they can be, because they can run up to 10 to 15 minutes to finish, and that's even with me doing a lot of the strong AoE finishers to kill everything fast. So this game can feel like a downright slog at times, since a lot of stages lack variety as stated before. The devs try to make the stage not feel dull by giving the game a ranking system, turning the stages into a sort of puzzle for keeping your combos going, or what's called beats in this game. You can keep your combo going by shooting objects or people in the world, and this would be great since some games really shine more trying to have a ranking system and trying to get a high ranking, but these stages aren't fully built around this mechanic as much as they should be. A lot of objects are either destructible in one stage, and then you have some stages where they're not. This can cause you to lose your beats by wasting time shooting something you think is destructible to learn it's not in this stage. The random dead ends being another issue, because going down these will kill any way for you to continue your beat, since they will usually have nothing to keep your combo going once you reach the end. Grave also gets these super cool moves called demolition shots, where you do a huge super move and you can really use these to clear a whole room. These, however, won't help your beat score, as none of these moves will count towards your beats. Using these incredibly strong room clearing moves that the game really wants you to use can make your ranking score lower, since all the enemies will be dead with nothing left to shoot, and the beats you could have got from just shooting them won't be added to your total count. The demolition shots also have some issues of their own. As cool as some of these are, a lot of them feel weightless and useless. Once you learn about the 2 giant AoE attacks you can get, you won't need anything else, as these will give you full iframes during the whole time and screen nuke most things around you. You can even use these during really hard parts or fights in the stages to just iframe your way through it. The only other one I used a lot was the ground slamming move in the first one you get, but the ground slam has pitiful range. In the first one, where Grave summons a giant bullet, will just miss sometimes and explode behind everyone. I'm glad the devs did try to make a lot of unique moves for these, but when so many of them will waste a slot over the obvious 2 screen nukes, I can't say it matters much after that. You have a mode you can go into called Rage Mode. To activate this, you use a demolition point and then start blasting. Personally, I use Rage Mode a lot, mostly to deal with certain enemies I'll cover later. Grave also has a number of different ways you can shoot. You can shoot while dodge rolling, and this will have Grave shoot out really fast, but it's not as spammable as normal shooting. He can move while shooting, but this comes with the drawback of him moving slower than you would while not shooting. You can spin the camera around while shooting, and this causes Grave to start shooting in random directions really fast. Pressing the triangle button will also trigger this move. You will notice this ends up not being that effective as the game wants you to think, since you can't really control your shots in this mode, and most of the time enemies will dogpile on you and knock your shield off before you can kill them. If you decide to stay still and shoot, this will give the most damage output, but it puts Grave in danger of getting hit more often. I mostly use this for whenever I come to long hallways and enemies will just run towards you. It just makes quick work of them. Finally, you may have noticed the giant coffin he carries on his back. Well, he uses this for melee attacks, and this has to be some of the worst melee combat I've ever seen. I even bought the majority of the melee upgrades thinking with more combos and moves it would make it feel better and more engaging, and it still sucked. The most useful thing the coffin has is being able to spin it and deflect back projectiles, but with the new patches, using any melee move will deflect projectiles no matter what. The Death Tornado attack is still the better option with this, as most other melee attacks have weird hitboxes versus the giant hitbox this one has. Usually the Death Tornado attack will come into play when you get into a room full of rocket launcher guys and you're being bombarded with rockets to the point this is your only way to not get hit. And in pre-patch, it was so much worse. The only reason you would ever consider using melee combat is because it gets you art points for each kill you get, and I believe you get art points that earn more currency, but I for the life of me can't remember what it does, and not even the wiki really tells me what it does. G.O.R.E also can use this coffin as a grappling hook to pull enemies in and use them as human shields. While you get more protection from shots, this does come with the drawback of being able to only use one of your guns. But it's great when you grab someone and none of the enemies even think for a second to not still shoot at you and kill their friend. I've had so many of them just shoot rockets at me and kill them. Grave also has access to execution moves, or like Mortal Kombat finishers. When Grave shoots an enemy enough, there's a chance they will get stunned. Once this happens, they will glow purple, allowing you to walk up and press L3, or pull them over to you to just outright kill them. Once you beat a level, you can spend the points you earn on new moves or just ability upgrades, and I find this to be dumb because of how expensive everything can get, and how hard money is to get in this game. I beat this game and I still didn't have Grave fully powered up, and some of these are required to get as it's the only way to unlock more powerful moves. You would have to grind heavily if you want to get everything in the game that already overstays its welcome with the gameplay. Either the devs need to lower the cost of everything or just make the money you get at the end way more. I think now it's time to cover the enemies at Gungrave. For most of the time you will be dealing with mafia men, soldiers, and in later stages, you start to deal with more monster-fight creatures like these lizardmen or the worms. While these guys may look out of place, it's supposed to be corrupted people from the seed drugs, so story-wise I guess it makes sense. The worst enemy in my opinion are the snipers and the riot shield guys. The third would be the Among Us guys, but they're more annoying because their attacks have a lasting effect and they run away from you after they attack. And when you have rooms full of these guys, it becomes just where you can't see shit. The riot shield guys break the flow of combat so much. As soon as they show up, you gotta just stop shooting and either go melee their shields till they break, use a demolition attack to break their shields, or use rage mode, or the clunky charge shot that half of the time just outright misses them. I would end up just using rage mode because you gain art points for every kill, and I could guarantee I would break the shield and then kill them every time, as most demolition shots you can use would just break their shield but not kill them. The snipers are awful, as the game loves putting them in places where they're hard to reach, or they're so far back you have to run through everyone to get to them, or constantly watch them instead of being focused on the combat in front of you. They do so much damage that they're a huge threat as soon as you see that blue laser show up. The Among Us guys are annoying as I stated before because they throw either poison gas or fire bombs at you, and these will cause lasting damage and don't go away for a while. And then they run away when they do this, and because you get so many rooms full of these guys, it makes it so hard to see as it's just full of green gas around you. The rest of the enemies are just more guards with better guns, or these monster-fied people being even more monster-fied. The bosses, though, I feel are a mix of insane and also really stupid. The problem with some of these bosses is that they feel like they were made for another game. These bosses will require strict timing with dodging and watching their attacks, and if you haven't noticed, Grave is incredibly slow. His dodge roll iframes is almost non-existent, so half of the time you'll go to dodge and still get hit. The best strat for these bosses is to have Grave lock onto them and just walk around them in a circle while never letting them close the distance. I beat so many bosses doing this, and it's so boring, but I mean, if it works, it works. Now, the game later on lets you play as two different characters, one of them being Quartz, who only has one redeeming move, and it's her shadow attack because the range for triggering this is insane. You're supposed to dodge right before getting hit to trigger this, but if you just see an enemy even getting ready to attack, you just dodge, and 99% of the time this move will come out. She is one of the worst controlling characters as she's strictly melee combat, and her only long range attack just freezes enemies so you can run up and hit them more. Her two super moves aren't even that good either, but luckily we only have to play as her once. This stage has a lot of platforming in it, but with patches later added, all these segments now just have boards you can walk across. And I feel that's just a very weak way to fix the stage when you could have just fixed her jump and made it better to use. But, I don't know, man. The next character you can play as is Bungie, and man, this guy is fucking amazing. He's fast, his specials have a wide range and deal nice damage, he can teleport, and he has the same guns as Grave for the most part. Melee combat still sucks with him, but that's more of the whole game as an issue and not just him. Now, before the patch, you played as him twice, one with his own stage and a part near the final area, and playing as him before the patch in the final area is horrible, as he will be massively weaker than Grave against waves of the strongest enemies in the game. With the new patch, you can now buy him from the shop and upgrade him. You can even get one extra demolition attack, which will be the only one you'll ever need to use with him. But the fact the game wants you to have 30k to buy him when the levels barely can give around 3 to 5k, you're asking for pointless grinding. They should have just lowered the price or let you use them after you beat the game if you wanted. I did think at first he could have been used after the stage you first play as him, but then again, you're never going to want to use Grave after you use him, so probably keep him near the end of the game. But once you get him, the game turns into this fast-paced shooter as Bungie is actually fast and he can get around. I ended up just using him for the rest of the game since his teleporting dodge has so many iframes that bosses actually feel like they were made to fight him instead. While Bungie may not be as customizable as Grave, he still has a good enough kit to take care of everything, to the point the faster and better movement is a better trade-off in my opinion. Now, one thing I didn't expect was the music to be so good in this game. From the more calm and softer songs to the one song that feels like it's from DMC where it just says it's time to die, it's time to kill. While I feel a lot of the slower songs don't really fit, they still sound nice for what it is. The faster paced music is perfect for this game and really helps the energy of shooting bad guys. Well, with the story being the last thing to go into detail and fully cover, I'll go into that. As said before, we're here to stop a gang who's mass producing the drug called Seed. We go to Scumland and then just shoot everybody in our way till we have to head to the tallest building in the city. We go through a bunch of other levels and soon find Mika, and she wants us to help them all escape as she's going to the warehouse. Then it's back to just shooting everyone again, and after a while you run into a capsule and use it to get to the main Seed warehouse, back to more blasts until the 4 bad guys show up, as we then see a giant seed core that they built. Gonpo is probably my favorite, as he's also the only one of the bad guys with a decent VA. The old guy sounds like he's pretending to be old, the ninja man sounds 13, and the female just sounds like she's doing the generic sexy edgy female voice that a lot of edgy VTubers do. Luckily, before they could murder us, Mika shows up and saves the day. Then we get a shot of some mysterious guy that then cut back to Grave badly injured. Mika tells the doctor we're heading back to Hong Kong and Grave will need a blood transfusion. And we learn that there's a good chance this is the second seed core we saw, but we can only find out once we get to Hong Kong. We can now see Grave being carried on a stretcher as a sniper is seen trying to shoot him, but Mika blocks the shot and it's more funny than anything.
What? No!
We hurry out of there as a mysterious guy is back in the shot next to the assassin. Grave and Mika are now hurt as Mika is somehow infected with Seed. I don't know how the fuck that happened, but she's now deformed. I don't know. The game never explains how she got infected. I guess the shot had Seed in it. I don't know. Grave gets injected with blood for his blood transfusion as Court starts to look at the monitors until a huge explosion happens and a gang shows up, and there's this cute scene with this cup that Quartz has, where in this scene it has this face to then have a different face for when it's thrown through the smoke. Just a little detail that I love. She's beating up the gang members, but then gets stopped by a guy wearing glasses as he kicks her away to then see Grave still in the chair as the man walks up to him and points a gun at his head. Grave wakes up and then stops him. We learn his name is Bungie as Grave just punches the shit out of him, and we clearly see he's infected with something before he makes his getaway.
Bungie! Oh. Stop! Shadow, what are you doing? Yeah, smash him up!
Then it's back to blasting as usual. Make our way through Hong Kong till we run into a ninja guy from before with what seems to be a knockoff Bruce Lee with him. He's a cocky asshole as he talks massive shit. Then the ninja guy fights us as we also beat him up with our guns. After he gets shot enough times, he then injects himself with Seed and turns into a demon-looking beast, but we still take him out with a bunch of shots to the face. Once that's over, we're back with the doctor as we learn a plane kept going back to Vietnam over and over, and that's where we need to go next. We get there and blast some more till we stumble to the refinery, but out of nowhere, a sniper shoots at us, and it's Zell. And this man probably has one of the worst callers I've ever seen, and I hate his voice acting so much. We end up beating him like the other bosses, but Grave spares him for whatever reason. Court shows up and tells him we need info from him and how to get to the refinery as he doesn't know what we're talking about. He's upset because he was lied to by the Raven clan. He decides to help us and we go into the door and continue through. While deep in the cave, we come upon orc men eating bodies as we learn they're starting to consume humans, but nothing a gun won't fix. Soon we find the lab where the experiments are taking place to then run into Quartz and the doctor. We learn pure seed has been injected into people with something added or a new approach was done, but we're not really sure yet what's going on. We do believe Jensen isn't working alone, as we're not sure who or why someone would be doing this and running the risk of the other two clan bosses finding out. Since they probably had another source smuggling seed, we head out, but before we could, the roof starts to collapse as a monster appears to attack us. Grave shoots it to death, but then we learn that Quartz is now stuck from getting to us. We have to go through her stage to get her out. She runs into Zell and the doctor as she's now safe, but Grave hasn't showed up. But before this becomes an issue we would have to address, Grave just shows up and we fly off. Zell is now in the ship jamming Raven's scanners so Grave can get to Big Wushin. I don't know, dude. I don't know what the fuck is going on in this game. The doctor tells us we need a blood sample from her to figure out if she's using the new seed that we discovered. We reach her and take her out to then have her inject herself with seed to make herself more powerful. Grave then shoots her in the face with what seemed to be the power of a railgun. We get the blood sample and move on. The doctor injects a blood sample into Mika as it's now working on Mika and carrying the seed outbreak in her, but before we can get too excited, something weird starts to happen to Mika as the seed crystallization process stops. But then she starts to glow, and then Quartz gets a weird migraine as she can feel Mika in her head.
I can feel Mika in my head. Like some kind of connection. Like she's inside of me. Part of me.
She passes out, and then a shot of a weird skull man is shown. It's so much just random stuff happening, and even after watching these cutscenes for the 4th or 5th time, I still don't know what the hell's happening. Zell then tells us a massive flash came from Singapore, so it looks like it's time to go there. We get there as a whole city block is covered in seed from a massive blast. They could have called this drug something else, dude. Jesus Christ. We assume the seed core from Scumland is now here, as there's no other explanation as Mika starts to glow and the doctor forces us to turn back, as an explosion could happen again if we get too close. Grave finally wakes up, and now it's time to just start blasting people to go get the seed core. We get to the HQ, and as soon as we do, we run into the old guy. He does the typical bad guy speech and tells us the person who's behind all of this is called Who Knows Who. That's the name, I'm not even joking. He tells us he's found what he needed and is close to controlling the world through seed. We battle him, and once he's almost beaten, he tells us the seed inside Mika is going to turn her into the ultimate weapon, and then he injects himself with seed to turn him into a super form to take us out. Grave, as usual, shoots him, and then we stab his cane into the seed core, but then get blasted back from the power of it. Grave, almost knocked out, gets woken up by Bungie as we head back to the ship. Zell tells us Gonpo took Mika and attacked them, so now it's up to us to go save her. Then the doctor gives a little backstories on Who Knows Who about a man who walked on an island or was the first person on some island. I still don't understand. We head to the last area as Zell drops us off, and we go inside a green portal to then run into Gonpo, as he again is probably the best villain in the whole game. He comes off as a fun asshole villain, and man, I adore these types of villains.
Let's cut to the chase, you walking corpse! Time to find out who the real man is.
He should have been the main bad guy, in all honesty. But his fight is probably the hardest one in the game, as his hitbox is giant and his damage output is insane. His super form also isn't any easier, but man, I enjoy this boss fight a lot. We take him out with Grave pulling out 2 laser swords and slicing him up, as the scene would look cool if it wasn't hard to see anything going on. With the blue portal now the only way to go, we go through and end up on an alien ship with tons of Orgmen and other monsters. We go deeper into the ship to find Who Knows Who, as he's resurrecting 2 people, I guess from the first game or Overdrive, but I don't know who they are. They do have a cool fight, but I don't know who they are. Once we take them out, we head further into the ship, and the final showdown with Who Knows Who is upon us. I still have no idea what his motive is. He's honestly a horrible bad guy. I guess he wanted a new world from Seed, but he doesn't really do a good job at saying why, especially since Seed just corrupts people and makes them into zombies who eat everyone. So does he want to destroy the world? Does he want a new world? I don't know. His design, though, is also somehow edgier than Graves, but I do like it. Bungie is also here, and this was the second time you can play as him in the story. We cut back to Grave almost dying as he's falling down, but before Grave passes out, he shoots the container holding Mika and frees her. And this is when Bungie shows up, and boy, I fucking love this guy. He gets shot with a fire attack and gets burned, and he just doesn't care. They fight as it's beautiful and well animated with this scene, and it's probably one of my favorite scenes in the game. While they're fighting, one of Bungie's guns gets knocked out of his hands, waking Mika up as she realizes Grave is actually fucking dead. And to rival Zero's scream after finding his love robot dead, she yells out in pain and pure agony.
No!
Bungie is also not doing so hot either. She then cries into Grave's mouth, which somehow saves him. I think it's because she has the sea drug in her, so her tears now have it, but it's never explained. The final boss tries to kill Bungie, but then Grave gets up and says his name is Brandon Heat. The final fight is actually well done, and I do really like it. It honestly feels like something from Nier. He will try to trap you in a box and you have to shoot out of it. He summons giant lasers and small laser balls for you to dodge. It's again one of the best designed bosses in the game. Shooting him enough finally gives you the final blow as Bungie rushes and starts shooting him with you, and then Zell just shoots him. Like, who isn't shooting this guy? The whole place is now collapsing as a giant seed bomb happens, but we get out before everyone dies. We cut to Mika, who's talking about, I guess, people now inside her, and how she's not afraid anymore and can control it. She even wants to learn how to use the power she has now. Then she cries. The world is still sadly infected badly, and it will take a while to fix everything. The final scene shows Bungie's just smoking a cig as he's badly beat up, but he survived the blast. My man never stops getting W's, and that was Gungrave G.O.R.E. By all means, this game is shit. Half of the stuff either works poorly or doesn't work at all, with so many random bugs and glitches, but I can't say I hate this game. I do really think I loved it for just how dumb and fun it is, and at times it honestly just feels like a 3D rail shooter, and it kept me feeling like a badass all the way through. Also, I never thought I would ever say this in like a review, but props to the devs for actually listening to the people who are playing it and adding updates and fixes. I remember when Biomutant came out and that game was a literal shit show, and when I talked about how bad it was, I was met with, "Oh, why don't you just tell the devs so they can actually fix it? Just wait for a patch and appreciate what we got." Well, it's been 2 years and that game is long forgotten, and the patches for that didn't fix much besides making it less tedious to grind. While just playing the pre-patch to the patch now for Gungrave G.O.R.E, the devs have shown they really care, and that's a big plus for me. While the game may never be perfect and what we have now is still not great, I can still say the devs made a shit masterpiece that I love. So thanks, Iggy Mob. You guys did great, and I really hope to see what more stuff you make in the future.